I put out a poll. Will Tony Mansolino manage the Orioles next season? And so far, 90% of those who are voting say no.
90%, huh?
Yeah.
So this is an interesting conversation because we are going to have more time to really digest what the Baltimore Orioles have to do and where their needs are. And I think a lot of people, if you watch the season, you kind of have an idea of what the needs of the Baltimore Orioles would be or need to be.
Yeah.
But the first priority up now is picking a new manager. And so we know Brandon Hyde was fired during the season. Tony Mansolino was the interim manager. And now, as we are talking about this today on September 29th, Tony Mansolino and Mike Elias had a press conference to talk about the whole year. But then Tony Mansolino then was asked questions specifically about whether he thinks he's going to be in consideration and whether he thinks he deserves the opportunity to have the interim tag be fully removed and the permanent tag of Orioles manager in 2026 added on. And do you guys have the tweet from Jacob Calvin-Meyer?
I don't, but I can just paraphrase. Basically, Tony Mansolino said that he thinks he passed with flying colors. So sounds like he's thinking he's deserving of the full-time job if offered to him.
And Zach, can you possibly find either one of the quotes or tweets? And do we have any of the stats specifically on the record that the Orioles had with Tony Mansolino as the manager?
Yeah, let me get that.
Because and look, it's not going to tell the whole story here, but this is where Orioles fans, I can tell why the poll is so negative, because you think anything that has to do with the coaching staff and this season, you don't want a part of in 2026.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you, Tony Mansolino, there's going to be a good chance that Tony could be the manager in 2026. So first off, he is beloved in that clubhouse by so many of the players. And so there's that camaraderie. Then the next part that's going to be is who is going to be available. And you're going to have to either look at from a veteran standpoint or look at from a new up-and-comer standpoint. But either option there would require a new voice. And I agree a new voice could be helpful, but the bigger thing is, could that new voice have autonomy to run the team the way that they want to? Because the front office, at least Tony Mansolino, they know what they are dealing with here. I have a hard time right now believing that the Orioles are going to bring in a full veteran manager, but they're in the process. Mike Elias said they are in the early stages of this, right, Brad? If I'm not mistaken, the rest of those comments were about the consideration timeline.
Yeah. So the it's still out there. There hasn't been a definitive answer on whether or not the Orioles are going to move forward with Tony Mansolino. He's obviously going to be in the running just because he has done well since the firing happened. I think you're absolutely right. If there is an opportunity to provide some more autonomy, I think one of the big reasons why there's been some struggle is that there's been a lot of micromanaging, it seems like, from the front office. I can't say whether or not that's a for sure thing, but if there is some more autonomy on the coaching side of things, if they can kind of say, okay, we trust you with this, then I think that it's going to go a long way for both the manager and the clubhouse.
Yeah, I think regardless, you're going to be married together on this.
For sure.
So you need to be able to cooperate with whoever you hire as your manager, and you have to have it fluid the entire time. And the expectation has to be set. This is what we expect. And there's no, tensions or stress. This is how it's going to be run, and everyone knows what that looks like going into. Now, if injuries pop up, that's a part of it. But what's happened over the last couple of years is there's been a little bit of a disconnect, at least this year, on what you need to do to be successful as a team and what you think would be the right options. Because I do believe that's also why Brandon Hyde, yes, losing happens, but I think there was just a disconnect that was growing, not only in the clubhouse, but specifically a disconnect between front office and the guys in that clubhouse, both from a manager standpoint, coach's standpoint, and to a player standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to bridge the gap here. And so for the Baltimore Orioles, look, they're not the only team that's figuring this out. I mentioned earlier in the show, Bob Melvin is canned by Buster Posey and the Giants.
I think Bruce Bochy's a shoo-in to replace him for that.
Out there in San Francisco.
Yeah.
If he wants to go back, because that's the one I'm really curious about. Bruce Bochy might ride off into the sunset. He might be done.
And he's up there in age.
And he's not done yet there in Texas.
He doesn't have much else to prove, though, in his career. Like, what if he just wants to keep going for the sake of keep going? Sure, but like, he's got nothing left to prove as a manager.
That is correct. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame manager.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. In that case, though, so we're seeing an opening happen with San Francisco. The Twins, which that doesn't seem like a fun place to be at the moment, where they are fully back into rebuild. There's a lot of questions around the organization. Rocco Baldelli there for a strong tenure. He's out. I'm sure we're going to see more down the stretch here, but for that's the case right now. Then there's Baltimore. So if Bruce Bochy were to retire or to move on, that means Texas would have an opening. Skip Schumacher's still over there in Texas, which I feel like that was a name that was connected to Baltimore for a little bit. I think he takes over for Bruce Bochy there. But guys, I mean, I can give my opinion, but Zach or Brad and Kevin, I don't know, where do we want to start? Or Kevin, since you've been quiet right there for a moment, Tony Mansolino. If they say he's going to be the manager in 2026, your reaction would be?
It's not a move that I would make. I'd want to get the veteran manager in there. I mean, it seems like the players responded. Yeah, like that's, I don't know. I wouldn't be necessarily thrilled with it personally. I mean, I think that there's just, not that Mansolino can't lead, but I just think that someone who's been there and done that would be a much better fit for them at this stage. Because at this point, we can talk about all of the free agent signings or trades that they might make, and they certainly need to go out there and get the job done in that regard. But it's kind of like we were talking about last season at the beginning, where it's like a lot of how successful the Orioles are going to be is going to be based off how their young players take a step. Gunner's power numbers were down this year. Obviously, Adley was in and out of the lineup, and he struggled. Colton struggled. He was injured. Westberg struggled with injury. Obviously, Heston didn't pan out. Grayson was injured all year. I think having a veteran leader, and look, I'm not saying it has to be a guy who, managed for 30 years in the MLB or anything like that, but just someone who has, had a little bit more experience than what Mansolino has under his belt right now, I think would be a little bit better, because I think also some philosophies probably have to change. They probably have to, hitting staff, pitching staff, you probably have to make a couple changes there too. And I think just having a fresh start, some new ideas, I think that'd go a long way. So it's very possible Mansolino is the move. Like, it's not out of the question. But
you're right. Like, I think that's what people have to live with. And I think you're not alone with that, Kevin, of the veteran part. I didn't mean to cut you off. What I wanted to say was, this isn't even my opinion on who I would want. I want to take that part out of it. I'm just trying to evaluate and look at this. I'm wondering if Baltimore, with knowing how the front office operates, would they bring in an older school manager that had, like, we're talking about a Bruce Bochy. Would he actually come in, because it would require Bruce Bochy to do what Bruce Bochy wants to do? I don't know if that's going to happen. So that's why this conversation around Tony Mansolino. So then you're saying up and comer, or you run it back. And Zach, I think you pulled up the record for Tony Mansolino. And hey, if you're liking this video, let me just tell you, this channel has a lot more to offer. From behind-the-scenes content, sports betting, and unfiltered takes, you should join our channel memberships. And if you want to unlock exclusive content, private live streams for real-time breakdowns, and we're going to have a sports betting newsletter from yours truly and the rest of the gang here at the Ryan Ripken Show. And on top of that, custom emojis, badges, shout-outs, and straight access to our inner circle. So be a good kid and hit that join button below. All right, now back to the video.
Yeah, he finished the season 60-59. They actually show you a lot of stats. 21 challenges, 11 overturned. That's a 52.4% success rate. 1 ejection. If I get the notification that Tony Mansolino is named manager, I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed. I think Tony did a great job being an interim manager. I think he got put in a super shitty situation, in a super shitty, just everything about where the Orioles were. I mean, he took over a team that at the time was 14, 15 games under 500. Everyone and their mother, it seems, that is supposed to help this team is getting injured. Like, there was not a lot of good. And I think he did pass with flying colors the interim manager job. And I think down the line, Tony Mansolino is going to be a damn good manager. I don't think he is what the Baltimore Orioles need. I think they need a complete revamp in coaching staff. I think they need a complete revamp in just, hey, even if they're saying the same things, a different person to say it, a different, perspective. I am tired of going, and it happened the past 2 years where the Orioles go into playoff games, and we talked about the first year, Bruce Bochy ran laps around Brandon Hyde in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is not Brandon Hyde's fault. Why? Brandon Hyde had never managed in a playoff game. You go the next year, Brandon Hyde, they get out. I don't want to say got outmanaged there as much. The Orioles didn't score. Once again, he'd only coached and managed in 4 and then 5 playoff games.
Yeah.
I don't want to go when you have such an inexperienced team in the playoffs with the players.
Thank you.
I want a guy to go out there and go, I've been here before.
Yes.
I've done this before. Follow me into the fire. I will lead this team. And I think that's where, and even Mike Elias alluded to it, they're looking at guys with experience. And I think that is, with a young team, a very big thing. Did Tony Mansolino, I think, do enough to be a manager in Major League Baseball? Yes, and I think he would be a great hire for the Orioles if the expectation for next year was not you have to win the East and you have to go deep into the playoffs. If this was a team that was still rebuilding, that was in kind of when Brandon Hyde took over, I think Mansolino would be an incredible person for the job. Right now, I think I'm going over with experience puts him over, puts another guy over.
This is why I think, we, in the beginning, when Brandon Hyde got fired, we kind of tossed around Buck Britton's name a little bit. I think the same thing. I like Buck Britton a lot. I think he's going to be a great manager one day. I don't think right now is the time, for the exact same reason that you just said, or the exact same points that you made with Tony Mansolino. I would like to see the Orioles find a manager that's won a playoff game.
Yeah.
Because, to your point, the team is so young, and then you have a manager that's never been in a situation either when it comes to like postseason ball, because we all know it's a lot different. And then you have these young players that are looking to a manager to provide them with direction, or provide them the way in the postseason. And he's never been there himself either.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it would make a lot of sense if you went and found a guy that actually has playoff win experience because of how young that team is. And so I'm in your boat, Zach. It wouldn't be surprising if Tony Mansolino was the manager next year, but I would also be a little disappointed, because I think that there's an opportunity, a big window for this young core to really go win a lot of playoff games. And I just don't know if now's the right time to put in another manager that's never won a playoff game.
So, and I think that sentiment is felt throughout a lot of
and it's nothing against Tony. I think it's just a fair thing to say.
Right. And the thing, so when I say this, when I've talked about of what I think could happen versus what I would like to see happen.
Yeah.
What I think could very well happen is keeping continuity with Tony, and he stays on. But what I think is most important is having somebody in there that can be a difference maker for you. And the word isn't motivating. You shouldn't have a manager motivate major league players.
No,
that's not going to be the case. But you do need a guy that is able to steer the ship when things go wrong, and that can gravitate and take over a room. And when you look up to managers that come to mind in recent years, I look up to Cleveland with Stephen Vogt. Stephen Vogt commands the room when he's there,
yeah,
and he makes that impact. Baltimore needs a guy like that. And if that's a veteran manager or new manager, they need that. And above all, and this might be an unpopular, or this is my opinion, the Orioles need to establish what type of team they need to be in 2026. And what I mean by that is, how do you want to play? And you need continuity from lineups. You need continuity of what your roles are going to be in the bullpen, and it needs to be established. Every team, when you look at the ones that have had success around Major League Baseball, more times than not, yes, they have some platooning, but they have a set plan where guys have an idea of what they want to do. Baltimore has had so many different parts of this over the years, and I'll get to you, Zach, in a second. They've had so many different parts, and I think that matters.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at the Orioles, I thought down the stretch when you had Jackson leading off for a while, and I still like Dylan Beavers up there, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But Jackson, Jordan, Gunnar, great. Run that for the next year, because I don't like flip-flopping Gunnar Henderson from hitting third to hitting first. Whatever your group's going to be needs to be it. Whoever your bullpen setup guys, your high-leverage guys need to know what they need to be in. And above all, your lineup then has to dictate what guys' roles are. And I'm not saying roles of like basketball or football when you're going, well, am I in basketball? Am I a facilitator? Am I a defender? Or for football, am I a playmaker? Am I a guy that does the dirty work? Whatever like your thing is. What I mean by it is you need to identify what you do well. And I think for the Orioles, they have too many guys that are capable of doing something, but don't play to their strengths. So, like, I'll go to this. I love Colton Cowser. I think that the Orioles at times wanted to make him into a power hitter, into something that he is not. I think he is a great I think Colton Cowser can be a great hitter. But I think the fact that the emphasis was so much on power, people got to keep this in mind. Colton Cowser had one of the lowest strikeout rates of any college prospect coming into his draft. And now he has the highest strikeout rate, one of the largest in baseball. That doesn't make sense to me. That's a philosophical thing.
Yeah.
So whatever you're going to make with your team, I don't care who your manager is, you have to decide how this Baltimore Orioles team is going to play. And if that's not adjusted, I don't care who you put in as your manager, you're going to run into some similar situations. Sorry, Zach, go ahead.
No, I didn't actually. I thought it would be better. I was going to bring up a quote, but I think it would be better if we just heard it from the source where we talked about kind of with when it comes to knowing your role and stuff. So here's Mark DeRosa kind of talking about it.
Understand the human element of the game and how each move, if the lineup's constantly changing, how can you expect your team to get in a flow? How can you expect guys to know your roles? The most successful teams are the teams where guys drive to the yard every day knowing how they add value to that team. Not wondering if I'm hitting third today, seventh if I go 0 for 4. Am I on the bench? Am I a starter? What am I to this team? Because then you're constantly trying to change your profile day to day. That was the one thing I thought Bobby Cox did better than anyone. He let you know in spring training it was going to be hard for you to change his thought process on how you added value, but I never drove home wondering where I stood year to year on what his expectations were. And I think that's huge.
It is huge.
Yeah.
People knowing what their roles are huge. Now, I will say, if you're one of those on the cusp type of guys and you could be moved up and down, like that's the nature of the beast. But knowing what you have to get done to get it done. And I think for Baltimore, look, when you're in the development process in the minors, your goal is to try to figure out how you can have the talents to keep moving up. Once you get to the big leagues, it's how do you do enough for your team to win ball games? And so like Kobe Mayo, it has power potential. Jackson Holiday can hit for power as well. They're not the same player. So that's my point. Guys have to figure out what they need to be. And I think that is a talking point that we haven't discussed enough, or maybe I feel like I have going on with 105.7, but it is very important. I don't want to keep moving Gunnar Henderson up and down if there's a lefty or a righty in the lineup. I want Gunnar Henderson to be my middle of the order bat. There's question marks for the team, but one thing's for certain: the guys that you know who you want in your lineup, you got to have that set plan. And I know they say they have the set plan, but I think that's something you really have to look at. And Chris, I know you see your question about why you're not talking about hiring a GM. I don't care who the GM comes in. It's not going to make a difference.
No.
It also, in one of the funniest things, I think, funniest parts of this whole whatever they did press conference was when, remember, they announced this. I think the news came out because they were trying to get the White Sox guy, and then because they announced it the same day the White Sox guy announced that he wasn't taking Baltimore's GM job. So I think that forced their hand. But when that was announced, they were like, yeah, GM search starts now. They said today, Mike Elias was like, I'm not sure we get a GM this offseason. We might wait. So I don't think the Orioles care who the GM is. I don't know. Think we're going to have a GM.
So
like, that's
to the
where
point,
we're talking about.
So to the point, Chris, of asking if you saying that just further validates the point that I'm trying to make. Regardless of who comes in, Mike Elias is the one that's going to have the final say on those types of things. Now, what I will say, because a lot of people want to be negative with Mike Elias, which I don't think is fair to that extent. He was the architect of what happened for this team.
Yeah.
But I will say, from what I understand, he's taking accountability, and they're trying to look at it from every different angle moving into 2026. And keep in mind, teams had a 3-year run where they had the most wins in the American League. 2022 to 2024, most wins in the American League. Nothing to show for in the postseason. I get it. But there are a lot of positives. Now the goal is, how do you take it to the next level? But regardless of who's coming in as GM, Mike Elias is still the president of baseball operations. Because you guys were there, Kevin, maybe I'll quiz you. Do you know who the GM of the Phillies is?
Oh, I know the one making decisions is Dombrowski.
So that's my point. So Preston Mattingly, we interviewed at the winter meetings, and Preston is bright as hell. He is going to be a president of baseball operations someday. Yeah. But you know the people that they remember, because he's still calling every single shot, is Dave Dombrowski.
Yep.
That's my point, is whoever comes in, Mike Elias is still going to be the head guy.